welcome to the Epic Fantasy Podcast. I am RG Long. I write the books, and normally my lovely, wonderful wife would be sitting right here, but she is not. She's gone for right now. She's actually right next door. She's taking a bath. She had a long day at work. She is getting ready to go on a trip tomorrow, and so instead of doing a podcast with her husband, who loves her very much. Her husband, who loves her very much, said, please go take a bath, go relax and rest. And so she is over there doing that for sure. And so you guys, as our listeners, are going to be in for a treat, because instead of getting to listen to me and my wife crack jokes at each other, which is what we would normally do on this podcast, we get to hear from Emilie Knight. Not only is she one time zone over, but Emilie is also one country over. So Emilie Knight, welcome to the Epic Fantasy Podcast. We're glad you're here.
Hi, I'm glad for being here too. This is fun.
Hey, Emilie, do me a favor. Introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are.
It's kind of boring. Nothing really overly special. I'm from Southern Ontario, basically, and I work in a car dealership call center. But I want to write full time, and I'm kind of the budding author of the Accordion Epics.
So you work at a car dealership call center. Is that where, like,
that's what these bills are
at? I have absolutely zero experience with this whatsoever. Like, is that where people have an issue with their car and they call into you, or what do you do for your 9 to 5?
It's a little of both. People do call into me when they have problems with their cars, and I have to make appointments for them, for the mechanics, and I also make outbound calls when people are due for maintenance.
Very nice. Yeah, I've worked in retail. I worked at a store called Bed Bath & Beyond, where I folded towels. That was a lot of fun. Also worked as a waiter for a while. My wife was my boss and actually had to come by and clean my tables for me because it was a terrible waiter. So yeah, I as well am not a full-time author. I get to do it on the side and having a lot of fun doing it. But that is that is an experience that a lot of people get to do. And it's really cool being an independent author, getting to meet these other authors who have a passion for writing their books and getting to do things like that, but also they have other lives that they live. They are more than just authors. Emilie,
Yep.
what got you started into writing? Why did you decide that you wanted to start writing?
I started writing probably like 10 years ago when I was in like high school. I just enjoyed reading so much, and I wanted to make my own stories. None of those ones are good. But a couple of years ago, I really started taking it seriously. Actually, during one of my shifts at work, I was just bored out of my mind. Doing my job, I was always making my quota, but it was just the regular 9 to 5 job every day that I was getting very tired of. So I wanted to do something more. I wanted to write a story of a character I had in mind and see where it took me.
Is the first story that you wrote the one that's currently published, or did you go through a couple different stories before you got to where you wanted to be?
Era of Undying is the first one. That's the one I started working on just a couple of years ago. And then Dagger and Scythe is the prequel to that
one.
It's
a prequel. Okay, so
Yes.
I just did a little bit of internet stalking to go and find you, and so I'll definitely be linking both of those down there for sure to make sure that more people can find your books and know what's going on. I heard from the guy who connected us that you also have a sequel in the works for this series as well.
Yes, it's more on the back burner at the moment. I'm still kind of working out a plot for that one, see where the characters are and how they might regain some motivation, sort of thing. So yeah, there's a sequel definitely on the back burner. Might not come out for a year or so, but I'm working on more stuff too.
Very cool. Yeah. Did you, when you sat down to write, did you already know where you're going to go? Did you already have the plan, or is it a little bit? The author term is pantsing. Were you writing without an outline?
I'm a pantser all the way. I have a very basic outline of like a few points I want to hit and like a general ending, but usually I just let the story sort of take hold and see where it goes. Makes a couple of plot holes that way, but once you kind of smooth it all out, it's really
Uh,
good.
yeah, I understand the plot holes. I actually have a friend of mine who reads my books specifically for that purpose. The his job is to find my holes, my inconsistencies, and to help make
Yes.
sure that things line up. And I'm currently writing book 12 that he has the half of, and he was
Nice.
referencing something way back in book 6. He's like, now when book 6 happened, I'm like, okay, you keep better track of this than I do. And so I was really appreciative of him. Yeah, there's a lot to go back when you've got to find the holes and make sure that everything fits and things like that. Very cool.
It's not bad though. Sometimes I find the plot holes are good and obvious because I'm writing a third book right now, and during one of my sessions at work, also I was able to sneak in a little
Nice.
bit on my lunch hour, and all of a sudden I just stopped and cursed under my breath, and all my coworkers looked at me and said, "Are you okay? What's wrong?" So yeah, I found a plot hole. Everything's fine. I need to fix it.
I found a plot hole, but don't worry, everything's fine. Oh,
Everything's fine. I found a plot hole.
uh, I love it. Um, so, Emily, before we started recording, we were talking about your name. So, your first name is Emilie. So, there are people who might be listening to this podcast
Yep.
later, not being able to see the video. So, your name is spelled Emilie, which now that I'm saying that out loud is actually rather
Yes.
hard to say because words are difficult sometimes. So, but your last name is Knight. And so I am going to play a
Mhm.
little game with you here where it is, I'm going to give you true or false questions. And the name of this game is called Possibly a Knight. All right, so
Okay.
uh, the these three true or false statements might apply to knights and they might not. I am fairly certain about the accuracy of these questions. If you want to fact check me, listeners, later on, please do. But these are questions that I got off what seems to be like a sixth grade um, website, something that's right around there for middle school students, which I love. That's who I work with, for my day job. So I'm going to give you some true or false questions here with our game, possibly a knight. Here's your first one.
Okay.
All right, so knights, when they were forming after they had been formed for a while, divided themselves into orders later on. So they were the Knights Templar and things like that. So when knights divided themselves into these religious orders, often they made a pledge to God of poverty and charity. Is that true or is that false?
I'm gonna say true. I know the charity part is true, but now I'm like 50%. I don't know about the poverty part. I'm gonna say true
All
just in
right. So
case.
uh, true is incorrect on again and again. So I'm going from this fifth grade thing. They
Oh,
actually made
okay.
a vow of poverty and chastity, uh, which
Oh, okay. I had
poverty
it
and
backwards.
chastity, right? Which is interesting because a lot of knights were not very impoverished. They were actually rather well-off lords and things like that. So maybe that was getting into.
The fact that they had to like buy their own
Yeah, it
armor
was
too.
expensive to be a knight back then. All right,
They kind of needed some income.
so maybe. All right, so there's one. It's old news under the bridge. Here's your second one. The word
Okay.
knight comes from an old English word meaning servant. True or false?
I believe
Yeah, that
true.
one is true. Uh, I did not. I did not know that.
Yay.
Uh, I, like most of people, had no idea where night came from, and just remember that I was spelling night with a K, and thinking, okay, not daytime,
Mhm.
night, but with a K. So I learned something today. Knight means servant. Again, interesting because it was often lords and people who were
I think I see
very
that.
well off who became knights. So, uh, yeah, interesting.
Mhm.
All right, and then last one, first
Mhm.
knights. So the first knights from the Middle Ages, which I was surprised by this. Knights were a thing for over 400 years, at least in timelines and things like that. Before what it was, longbows and handguns and things like that made their armor kind of obsolete because they could just pierce right through it. So that's the thing. Again, learning lots of things today. First knights of the Middle Ages fought for
Mhm.
Charlemagne, the king of the Franks, in the 700s. True or false?
The
The
700s?
700s.
Isn't that around the Dark Ages?
I have no
I'm gonna
idea.
say false.
My history is a little sketchy. 700 seems like a really long time ago, but according to the website I went
Seems
for,
too old for.
it is true. Knights began in the
Oh, okay.
700s, and then they went on all the way until about the uh, now let's see, 13th century would be the 1200s. I think that's how that works. So yeah, around
Yeah.
the 1200s or so, it was actually cheaper to have a standing army than it was to hire out your local lord with his expensive armor and expensive horse. So I thought that was really interesting. In any of your books, do you have
That's cool.
knights or anything like that in your books? Do you have like characters who walk around in big armors or write books or anything like that? Do you have people like that?
There are knights. They're kind of in the background. There's like city guards and soldiers who protect people, and I'll probably delve more into them in later books, but in like Era of Undying or Dagger and Scythe, they're not quite there yet. You do meet some, I call them sentries. They're kind of like knights, but they're undead
Ooh,
skeletons.
I enjoy some
Yeah.
fantastical undead skeletons. No, we were. I have three daughters, and the other day we were going to a store, a comic book store that was exact only for daddy. They have no interest in it, whatever, unless it's Pokemon cards, which they're interested in that. But we were there for Warhammer, which is a tabletop game that you paint by these miniatures. And my oldest was talking about, Daddy, look at these with the skeletons. Why is this a common theme? My oldest reads books, just devours them. She's 9. She's reading like crazy. And she's like, all
Oh,
these books
good.
have like undead skeletons. Why do you think all these people have undead skeletons? It's like, well, I don't know. Maybe because we're afraid of skeletons walking around. It looks creepy. I don't really rightly know why that's a common theme. But yeah, in my book, I've got some undead people walking around. In yours, you've got this. Now, I have a question about the Undying Era. So I actually have your cover up here on the screen right now, and I love the sword that you've got in this female's hand. Is that correct? Is it a female warrior right there?
Yep, that's
Pen, the
Pen.
main
That's the main
character. Okay,
character.
I love that. I also really enjoy your opening line. I'm going to read this here real quick. It says, "There hasn't been a blood warrior for decades. Everyone assumed they were extinct and couldn't return. Turns out they were just in hiding." I really like that. I think that would definitely draw me in. Uh, without giving too much away from your book, what are the blood warriors? Because I read that and I was like, oh, okay, is this like a knight? Because that would be interesting. But what do you have in mind when you say blood warrior?
I'll keep it vague, but you can kind of tell on the cover too. She can draw her blood outside of her body and harden it into any weapon that she
Oh,
needs. So that sword she's holding with those little red tendrils going by, that is her blood making that weapon.
okay. No, that's really interesting. No, I like that. Okay, so I
Thanks.
was looking at it, and it looked like the sword was a little more ethereal, than actually like hard steel and things like that. And so it's her blood that makes that. Okay, no, that's an interesting thing. I like that. That's cool. That's good. That's trippy. Definitely gotta have. That's gonna have me thinking about that for a
Thank
little
you.
while. Oh, that's neat. Okay, so Era of Undying is the book, and you have a prequel. You had said that it's already. How would people get that prequel from you?
That one, Dagger and Scythe, it is available on Amazon for ebook pre-orders right now, so anyone can like look it up. Paperbacks and hardcovers are on their way. I even
Ooh,
have one
point it out. Yeah,
here.
yeah, yeah. Yes, that's my
Yay, this is
favorite part.
it.
I'm not gonna lie.
So yeah,
No, I'm saying
sorry?
holding the paperback is like my favorite part. I love actually holding.
I know, I love holding
Mm,
physical copies as well. I have a
that's
bunch,
great.
obviously.
And so you said it's for pre.
Yeah. So yeah, long story short, it will
Okay,
be up
so
on
and
Amazon.
it's on pre-order right now.
The ebook is, yes. The other two, like hardback and the hardcover and paperback,
Yes.
yes,
Okay,
but
I
not
love
quite
it.
yet.
So prequel forthcoming and era of Undying is available right now. So awesome! If you enjoy epic fantasy books, then
Mhm.
maybe you should check out Emily Knight's books and see. Oh man, be as tripped out about this Blood Warrior stuff as I am. That's really really cool. Okay, no, I'm excited to hear about that, and glad that you are sharing that with us, and that our readers get to hear about that too. Very cool.
Anytime.
All right. Well, hey, thanks again so much for listening to the Epic Fantasy Podcast. We do this Monday nights, 9 p.m. That's when it's live, Central Time. But you can find it on Spotify. You can find us on iTunes as well as YouTube, wherever you might enjoy a good podcast or a video. Emily, again, thank you for joining us. So glad you could be here. All
Yeah,
right.
thanks for having me.
We will
This is
see you
fun.
guys.